The night in Mexico City often begins with a quiet hum. Cars move slowly outside, their engines low, like a constant breath through the streets. A single lamp glows inside a modest room, painting the walls in a soft yellow haze. Shadows drift across the floor as if they are waiting for someone to notice. Javier sits by the window. He holds a silver chain in his hand, fingers brushing its cold surface. The chain feels heavier tonight. He cannot explain why. He listens to the faint echo of footsteps from the street below. Each step sounds distant, like memories returning one by one. The air carries the faint smell of dust and incense. A small picture of the Virgin Mary hangs above the door, its colors fading with time. Javier glances at it and wonders if silence itself can give an answer. His heart beats a little faster. Thump, thump. The sound blends with the hum of the night. Behind the thin wall, Manuel rests. His breathing is light and steady, almost like a lullaby. Javier knows his younger brother dreams often, dreams of freedom, dreams of a life without the weight of eyes watching. Their family has always prayed, always followed tradition, always demanded quiet obedience. But inside both brothers there is something unspoken, something that does not bend. Javier remembers the streets of the old neighborhood, the narrow alleys where children played soccer until sunset. He recalls the sound of laughter, the crash of a ball against a broken gate, the smell of tortillas from a corner stall. Those simple days are gone, but the echoes remain, soft like the chain in his palm. In recent years the city has changed. Whispers of debt and danger travel as quickly as the wind. The name of the cartel is never said too loudly, but everyone feels it. Families count money in secret, afraid of the knock at the door. Javier knows his family has become part of that shadow. He tries not to think of it now, but the thought stays close. The night deepens. The lamp flickers once. Outside, a stray dog barks, then silence returns. Javier places the chain on the table, its metal clinking softly, like a drop of water falling into a well. He closes his eyes and listens again. He hears the rhythm of his brother's breathing, steady and calm. He hears his own heartbeat, steady but stronger. Two rhythms, side by side, bound by more than blood. The air cools, and the city slows. Somewhere far away, church bells toll once, a gentle reminder that time is still moving. Javier exhales and leans back against the chair. He lets the shadows grow longer around him. The chain glimmers faintly, a small light in the quiet room. The night is heavy, yet it carries him gently, as if preparing a dream. And so the story begins, softly, in the hum of the city, where secrets rest beneath calm breaths, and where tomorrow waits quietly behind closed doors. Javier with the silver chain in the dark. The night carries a quiet weight. In the heart of Mexico City, a small apartment hides from the noise of the streets. Its walls are thin, its windows old, but inside the air feels still, almost heavy. The hum of the city outside drifts in like a faraway song. Tires hiss across wet pavement. A dog barks once, then silence falls again. One lamp hangs from the ceiling, its glow soft and uneven. The light touches only part of the room. Shadows cling to the corners, stretching long across the floor. The walls are bare, painted in pale color that has faded with years. A wooden chair rests near the window, and in that chair sits Javier. His body leans forward, shoulders tense, head low. His hands clutch a silver chain. The chain catches the light in thin flashes, but near its clasp a dark mark lingers. It is faint yet clear, a stain that refuses to fade. Javier's fingers move across it again and again, rubbing, pressing, as if his touch might erase it. The metal stays cold beneath his skin. The air inside is warmer than his hands. His palms sweat, yet his fingertips tremble with chill. He shifts in the chair, wood creaking beneath him. His chest rises unevenly, breath pulling in short bursts. Thump, thump. His heart beats louder than the street outside. From a shelf in the corner, an old radio plays. The sound is soft, slightly cracked with age, but the tune is clear. A bolero drifts through the air, guitar strings plucked with slow patience, each note stretching long before fading. A voice follows, tender and sorrowful, carrying words of longing. The melody fills the room, weaving with the glow of the lamp and the rhythm of Javier's breath. He closes his eyes for a moment, letting the music sink into him. For an instant, he imagines a hall lit with colored bulbs, couples swaying together, their feet moving in time with the guitar. He sees himself younger, standing in shadow, watching, wishing. The memory is sweet and painful all at once. His eyes open again, pulled back by the weight in his hands. The chain lies across his palms. Each link gleams faintly, smooth and perfect, except for the stain. That small darkness draws his gaze again and again. He feels the urge to hide it, to slip it into his pocket, but instead he holds it tighter. The metal presses into his skin. Clink. A faint sound escapes as the links shift. Outside the window, a car moves past. Its headlights sweep across the wall. For a heartbeat, the room flares with brightness. In that sudden light, Javier sees something on the wall, a silhouette, sharp and unmistakable, the form of a body collapsing, falling downwards. The vision lasts no longer than a blink. The light passes, the shadow disappears. The room returns to its dim stillness. Javier's chest tightens. His breath catches halfway, then spills out too fast. Thump, thump, thump. His heart races in his chest. He stares at the wall, unblinking, waiting for the shadow to return. The wall remains empty, painted only by the lamp's soft haze. His fingers grip the chain so hard that the metal digs into his skin. Clink, clink. The faint sound echoes in the quiet. Sweat slides across his temple. His eyes shift to the window, but the street below is silent. No voices rise, no footsteps pass. Only the hum of the lamp above and the soft guitar from the radio remain. Javier swallows. A shiver runs down his spine, rising from the base of his neck to the tips of his fingers. He shifts in the chair again, wood groaning beneath him. He presses the chain against his chest, as though it can steady him. The dark stain feels heavier now, as if it carries the shadow with it. The bolero continues. The singer's voice trembles with emotion, rising and falling like a tide. Each note feels both tender and haunting. Javier listens, but the song no longer soothes him. The sound sharpens his unease. The music fills the spaces where silence once rested, and in that fullness he feels more exposed. Beyond the thin wall, Manuel sleeps. Javier can hear him breathing faintly, steady and soft. The rhythm is calming, a reminder that he is not alone. He listens for a moment, letting the gentle rise and fall ground him. He counts each breath, 1, 2, 3, until the pounding in his own chest begins to slow. Still, his eyes return to the chain. He studies it carefully, tracing the curve of each link, the way the light slides across them. His thumb presses the dark mark again, but it does not fade. It stays, stubborn, fixed. He wonders if it will always stay, no matter how much time passes. The lamp flickers once. The shadows shift, stretching longer across the floor, then settle again. The radio hums softly between notes. Tick, tick. The clock on the wall marks each second. Javier feels them pass, slow and deliberate, like drops of water falling into a deep well. He leans his head back. The plaster wall behind him is cool, steady. He closes his eyes briefly, but the silhouette appears again in his mind, sharper now, more defined. He sees the shape folding, falling, reaching toward the ground. His breath shudders. He opens his eyes quickly, but the wall before him is empty once more. He exhales. His chest loosens slightly. His hands open. The chain slips, sliding from his palm to the table. Clink. The sound rings in the quiet, small but clear. The silver rests there, still shining faintly in the lamp's glow, the stain visible even in the dim light. Javier stares at it without moving. His shoulders sag. The weight that filled the room moments ago seems to settle deeper, into the wood of the chair, into the silence between notes. The music on the radio shifts into the final verse, the singer holding a note long and low, carrying sorrow to its edge. The city outside softens too. The dog no longer barks. Cars pass less often. Only a faint hum remains, like the city breathing in its sleep. Javier's eyelids grow heavy. His breath evens, no longer rushed. He watches the chain one last time, then lets his gaze drift to the ceiling. Shadows sway gently, stirred by the flicker of the lamp. The song ends. The guitar fades, the singer's voice falls into silence. Only the soft crackle of the radio remains. Javier closes his eyes. He listens again to the steady rhythm of Manuel's breathing, close but distant, a lullaby beyond the wall. The room grows quieter. The chain lies still, unmoving, yet holding its secret. The night deepens, cool and heavy, but it carries Javier gently, as if guiding him toward rest. The silhouette does not return. The lamp glows faintly. The city outside hums low. And the story waits, silent, flashback, for what will come. Two queer brothers bound together. The memory begins with morning bells. They ring from the old church in the center of the neighborhood, slow and steady, carried by the cool air. Their sound travels across the narrow streets, bouncing against stone walls, reaching every small house with a gentle rhythm. Dawn, dawn, dawn. For children, the bells mean Sunday, a day for clean clothes, a day for silence inside the church pews. For Javier and Manuel, the bells meant something heavier, a reminder that their family belonged to a faith that demanded obedience. The two brothers grew in a house where rules spoke louder than voices. Their parents carried the weight of tradition. A crucifix hung in every room. Candles burned on the table each evening. The family prayed together before each meal. Silence was praised, questions discouraged. Love was offered, but it was strict, bound by the words of Scripture and the fear of sin. Javier, the elder, learned early to hide parts of himself. He kept his face calm when his chest burned with feelings he could not name. He held his breath when neighbors whispered about who was acceptable and who was not. He watched carefully, teaching himself how to move, how to speak, how to pass without drawing attention. Manuel, the younger, followed close behind. He was softer, quicker to smile, but his eyes revealed too much. Javier often caught those eyes lingering too long, watching another boy with quiet wonder. He would press a hand to Manuel's shoulder, steady and protective, reminding him to look away before anyone noticed. The house smelled often of incense, wax, and the earth from potted plants kept by their mother. Floors were swept each morning, dishes washed before the day ended. Order ruled everything. Yet beneath that order, a secret pulse beat between the two brothers. They shared a single small room. Two narrow beds stood against opposite walls, but most nights they stayed awake together, whispering in low tones until sleep pulled them under. Sometimes they did not speak at all. They simply listened to each other breathe, the sound enough to calm their restless thoughts. The bond was wordless, deeper than rules, a thread that tied them in silence. Outside, life in the neighborhood was loud and alive. Vendors called from the streets, selling tamales, fruit, and sweet bread. Children shouted as they played soccer, their balls striking gates with a hollow thunk-thunk. Music spilled from radios balanced on windowsills, filling alleys with rancheras and cumbia. The brothers loved these sounds, yet they knew the world beyond their door demanded something from them. In church, they sat side by side, straight-backed, heads bowed. The priest's voice echoed off stone walls, strong and certain. The incense smoke curled upward, covering the high ceilings with haze. Javier felt the heat of shame press into him each time the priest spoke of purity, of sin, of the narrow path. Manuel sat quietly, but his fingers twitched against his lap, small signs of tension. Javier would brush his knee lightly, a signal that he was not alone. There were moments, rare but clear, when the brothers felt free. Late afternoons when the sun dipped low and the sky blazed with orange light, they would climb to the roof. Up there, above the watch of their parents, they could speak more openly. They would look out across the city, its endless sprawl of houses, churches, and lights. They would imagine a future beyond the reach of those bells, a place where they could breathe without fear. Still, each time they descended, the weight returned. Their mother's careful eyes followed them. Their father's silence pressed like a wall. Even the neighbors seemed to carry judgment in their glances. The brothers learned the art of silence, of coded looks, of words half said and quickly swallowed. At night, when the world outside softened, their bond grew strongest. The thin walls of their room could not contain the quiet energy between them. Sometimes Javier would feel the edge of loneliness creep in, but then he would hear Manuel's breathing, soft and steady, and the fear would ease. Other times, Manuel would stir from uneasy dreams, and Javier would sit awake beside him until calm returned. The bond was not something they ever named. It was not spoken, only lived. A secret pact born of necessity and care. Two hearts beating in rhythm, two lives carrying the same burden. They knew what they were, though the world around them would not accept it. They knew they must carry it quietly, together, in every glance, every gesture, every unspoken word. Years passed, and the city around them shifted. Streets grew louder. News carried whispers of violence, of debts unpaid, of names that frightened people into silence. Their family felt those whispers too. Money grew tighter, worry heavier. Yet through it all, Javier and Manuel leaned on each other, their connection unbroken. One memory lingers above the rest. A night when rain fell hard on the city, drumming against the roof, spilling down the walls. The power flickered out, leaving the house in darkness. Their parents lit candles and prayed quietly in the next room. In their own small space, the brothers sat close, the glow of a single candle between them. The flame shook with each draft of wind, but the light stayed. They did not speak. They only watched the flame, their shoulders nearly touching. The silence said everything. The bond was unshakable. Even now, years later, Javier remembers that night as clearly as the chain in his hands. The candlelight, the rain, the warmth of his brother's presence. It was then he understood that their connection was not just family. It was survival. It was truth. It was the one thing that could not be taken, even by faith, even by fear. The bells still rang each morning. The priest still spoke each Sunday. Their parents still watched with eyes sharpened by tradition. But within that house, within those thin walls, Javier and Manuel carried their secret bond like a quiet flame. The memory softens as it drifts away. The bells fade into silence. The candlelight dims until only shadows remain. The rain slows to a hush, then stops. In the stillness, only the sound of breathing remains. Two rhythms, side by side, steady and calm. The night holds them gently, carrying them toward rest. And so the flashback ends, like a dream fading with dawn, leaving only the warmth of connection, unbroken. Diego arrives, the queer triangle begins. The first time Diego stepped into their lives, the day felt brighter than most. The sun rested high above Mexico City, its heat pressing against the streets, shimmering on the rooftops. Dust rose from each passing bus. Vendors called out their goods, voices loud and melodic. The air smelled of roasted corn, fresh fruit, and exhaust. Amid this rhythm, Diego walked with steady steps, carrying books in one arm, his other hand shading his eyes from the sun. He was studying law at the university, his path marked by long hours with pages filled in tight handwriting, by debates that echoed in classrooms lined with chalk dust. Yet outside those walls, his presence felt different. Diego carried an ease that seemed to soften the weight around him. Where others bent under rules and tradition, he appeared to breathe freely. His laugh, when it came, rolled smooth and warm, a sound that drew people closer. Javier noticed him first. The older brother often moved with caution, hiding what stirred within, but with Diego something shifted. He found himself watching more openly. The curve of Diego's jaw caught the sunlight. The way he listened with patience gave Javier a sense of safety he rarely felt. Inside, a quiet flame began to stir. Manuel felt it too, though differently. His admiration hid itself in silence. He watched Diego from the edge of moments, pretending not to, yet always aware. His heart carried the same pulse as his brother's, but he buried it deep, afraid of what it meant, afraid of what it might take from the bond they shared. The triangle formed quietly, unseen by the world beyond their walls. To their parents, Diego was simply a promising young man, respectful, ambitious, faithful. To the neighbors, he was polite, his future bright, perhaps even enviable. But within the small house, within the hearts of two brothers, Diego became something more, a figure both tender and dangerous. Evenings often brought him close. The three would sit in the courtyard, where the air cooled after the long heat of the day. The scent of bougainvillea drifted through the cracks in the wall. A radio nearby played boleros once again, soft and low. In those moments, time seemed to slow. Javier leaned forward often, voice steady, words confident. He shared thoughts, hopes, and fragments of dreams with Diego. His gestures revealed what his words could not. He longed for closeness, for recognition. Each small response from Diego felt like a step toward something forbidden yet irresistible. Manuel stayed quieter, his eyes lowered, his words few. But in the stillness, his feelings grew strong. He watched how Diego's hand brushed against his book, how his gaze softened when listening, how his smile arrived slowly but stayed long. Each detail lived in Manuel's mind, each detail guarded as though it were fragile glass. The city around them moved endlessly. Streetcars rattled. The church bells marked each hour. The shadow of the cartel spread through whispers in bars and markets, names spoken with caution. Yet in that courtyard, the noise faded. What remained was the quiet tension of three young men caught between tradition and desire. Javier felt boldness rise in him. He imagined walking beside Diego through the busy streets, unafraid of glances, unafraid of judgment. He imagined voices hushed as they passed, but his heart steady, his hand certain. Those visions pulled at him, even as the real world pressed back. Manuel felt the ache of silence. He imagined what it might mean if his brother's boldness succeeded. He imagined being left behind, carrying love with no place to rest. Yet he said nothing. He swallowed the ache, letting it settle in his chest, heavy and unmoving. Diego himself carried complexity. He spoke freely of law, of justice, of change. Yet beneath his confident tone, a restlessness stirred. He knew his own heart bent in more than one direction. He knew desire could not be confined to a single path. His smile toward Javier carried warmth, his glance toward Manuel carried tenderness. But he offered no clear sign. He left the space open, perhaps by choice, perhaps by fear. The nights deepened. In the quiet, after laughter faded, the brothers returned to their room. Javier often lay awake, staring at the ceiling, imagining Diego's voice, the sound of his steps, the strength of his presence. Manuel, across the room, did the same, though his silence hid it well. Two hearts beat with the same rhythm, each believing the other unaware. The tension did not break. It only grew, weaving itself into each shared moment. The chain between Javier and Manuel tightened. Their bond, already strong, now stretched with new weight. Neither wished to lose the other. Neither could deny what Diego stirred. Beyond their walls, history continued. The country shifted with politics, with protests in the streets, with stories of corruption and loss. The law, the very subject Diego studied, became both shield and weapon in that restless era. The weight of faith, of family, of survival pressed on all of them. Yet within the courtyard, within the dimly lit room, the struggle of three hearts mattered most. One night, rain began to fall. It tapped against the windows, a soft rhythm, steady and endless. The radio played quietly in the background, its sound mingling with the rain. The three sat together, books closed, conversation light. But beneath the surface, each carried thoughts too heavy to name. Javier's fingers drummed lightly against the table, tap tap, a nervous beat. Manuel's gaze followed the drops racing down the glass, his chest tight with silence. Diego leaned back, his expression calm, yet his eyes restless. The triangle held them, bound by threads invisible yet strong. When the night ended, and Diego finally stood to leave, the air shifted. Javier watched him go with longing, Manuel with quiet ache. The door closed softly, but the echo stayed. The rain eased. The brothers returned to their room. Two beds stood apart, but the silence between them felt heavier than ever. Each turned in his own direction, staring into the dark. Their breathing, once steady, now carried a tremor. Yet even then, their bond remained. The triangle had begun. It would shape what followed, twisting through choices, through silence, through the shadow of a city that did not yet understand. The night grew calm again. The rain slowed to a whisper. The radio clicked off. Only the sound of breathing remained, two rhythms in the dark, steady and fragile. The story rests here, soft and unresolved. Cartel debt. Waiting for Lewis leaves the paper on the table. The sound of a knock can change everything. It came one evening, just as the last light of day slipped behind the rooftops. The house was quiet. The air smelled of beans cooking, the low simmer filling the kitchen with warmth. A faint hum from the radio drifted in the background, another bolero, soft and slow. The city outside still moved, but in here time felt gentle. Then came the knock. Thump, thump, thump. Heavy, deliberate, too steady to be a neighbor. Javier looked up from the table. Manuel froze mid-step. Their mother set down a spoon, hands trembling just slightly. The rhythm of the knock pressed into their chests. Thump, thump, thump. When the door opened, Luis stood there. His presence filled the space even before his words. He was tall, well-dressed, his shirt crisp despite the dust of the streets. A faint smile rested on his lips, but his eyes told a different story. They were sharp, dark, carrying a weight that silenced the room. Luis was known in the neighborhood. Stories clung to him like shadows. Some called him charming, a man who laughed loudly in bars, who drove fast cars through narrow streets, who left behind whispers of danger. Others called him something else, a name tied to the cartel, spoken only when voices dropped low. He stepped inside without hurry. The air shifted with him. The scent of his cologne, sharp and heavy, pushed against the softer smells of the house. His shoes tapped on the tile. Click, click, click. Each step measured, deliberate. On the table he placed a folded paper. Its edges were clean, but the ink inside carried weight. A debt. Numbers written in dark strokes. The total was more than the family could imagine. Beneath the numbers, a signature. The name of a man no one dared refuse. No raised voices followed. No shouts. The threat was not in noise but in silence. Luis simply rested his hand on the paper, his fingers tapping once. Tap. His smile stayed, but his eyes did not soften. The air grew thick. The family understood. Javier felt his stomach twist. His hand gripped the edge of his chair until the wood pressed into his palm. He wanted to speak, but his throat closed tight. Manuel's breath quickened, shallow, almost hidden, but Javier noticed. Their mother's rosary beads slipped slightly in her hand, the cross swinging with a faint clink. Luis leaned back, calm, as if he had all the time in the world. He spoke slowly, each word steady, his tone almost polite. Yet beneath it, the meaning was clear. Pay, or face what followed. He let the silence do most of the work. Silence, and the heavy paper on the table. The clock ticked on the wall. Tick, tick, tick. Each second stretched long. Outside, a car engine idled, low and rough. A reminder that Luis had not come alone. That others waited in the dark, their patience thin. At last, Luis rose. His chair scraped lightly against the tile. He adjusted his cuff, smoothed his collar, lifted the paper once more. Then, with care, he placed it flat again, centering it on the table. His hand lingered for a moment, pressing the page against the wood, as though nailing the debt into the house itself. Then he left. His steps echoed softer now. Click, click, click. The door closed with a dull sound. The hum of the car engine deepened, then faded into the night. The silence that followed was heavy, almost unbearable. The family did not move at first. The radio played on, the bolero reaching its final verse, a voice filled with sorrow. Outside, a dog barked once, sharp against the stillness, then stopped. Javier finally reached for the paper. His hand shook. The numbers glared back at him. He felt their weight press into his chest, heavier than stone. He thought of Diego, of Manuel, of all the dreams they carried. He thought of how quickly everything could vanish beneath these numbers. Manuel stood near the window, staring out into the street. His reflection shone faintly against the glass. His lips pressed tight, his jaw stiff. Javier knew what his brother was feeling: fear, anger, helplessness, the same storm that raged in himself. But neither spoke. Words seemed too fragile. Their mother sat down slowly, the rosary still in her hand. She bowed her head. The beads clicked faintly as they slid through her fingers. Clink, clink, clink. A prayer, whispered too low to hear, rose into the air. The night moved forward. Neighbors lit candles in their windows. Voices drifted faintly from the street, laughter mixed with music. But inside the house, the atmosphere stayed heavy. Every sound felt sharper, as if the walls had grown thinner, as if danger itself could hear their thoughts. Javier folded the paper carefully, though his hands trembled. He placed it back on the table, the ink still fresh, the numbers still clear. The silence that followed was long, broken only by the steady tick, tick, of the clock. Later, when the lights dimmed and the house grew quiet, Javier lay awake. The chain still rested near his bed, silver catching faint light from the window. He thought of the shadow he had seen earlier, the body falling, the image that haunted him. He thought of Luis's eyes, sharp and unblinking. He thought of Manuel's silence, Diego's uncertain smile, the weight pressing closer. Sleep came slowly. The city outside softened, its noise fading to a low hum. The radio, left on low, played another old song. The voice drifted through the house like a ghost, gentle and sad. Javier closed his eyes at last. His breath slowed. The image of the paper stayed in his mind, numbers glowing faintly like embers. But even those embers dimmed, fading into darkness. The house settled into quiet. The clock ticked on. The night carried its weight, but also its calm. For now, silence returned, wrapping the family. Javier accepts the deal at Club Ramírez. The first time Javier heard the name Ramírez, it was whispered. The word carried a weight, passed in low voices, never spoken loudly in daylight. To the city, Ramírez was only a bar, a place of music and laughter, a place where neon lights glowed against the night. But beneath that glow, everyone knew something else rested there. Power. Secrets. Deals made in the dark. Javier did not choose freely. The paper on the table had chosen for him. The ink on the debt felt heavier than chains. Each number tied him closer to danger. And when Luis returned, his tone calm, his smile sharp, the offer came. Work for the club. Settle the debt. Protect the family. He said yes. The night he first entered, the streets outside pulsed with life. Cars honked. Radios blared. Vendors called out tamales, tacos, roasted nuts. The city was never silent, but within that sound, Javier felt only the rush of his own heart. His shoes pressed against the pavement, tap tap, each step carrying him closer to the door. The club stood tall, its entrance lined with light. A neon sign flickered, red and gold, humming faintly. Music leaked from inside, a heavy rhythm of drums, the bass deep enough to vibrate through the sidewalk. Laughter followed, mixed with the clink of glasses. From the outside, it looked alive, inviting. But Javier knew the truth hid deeper. The bouncer at the door looked him over. A nod, a step aside, the door opened. Warm air rushed out, thick with smoke, perfume, and alcohol. The music struck harder inside, steady and hypnotic. Boom, boom, boom. Lights spun across the ceiling, red, blue, green, chasing each other through haze. Javier walked in slowly, taking it all in. Tables lined the walls, drinks glittering beneath dim lamps. A stage at the back held a band, trumpets bright, guitars sharp, voices rising above the beat. People danced close, bodies swaying, shoes sliding across the floor. Laughter echoed, loud and unguarded. But beneath the joy, Javier felt something colder. Eyes watched from corners. Men in sharp suits leaned close to whisper. Papers exchanged hands. A glance here, a nod there, all too subtle for most to notice. The club was alive, but it was more than music and drink. It was control. Luis appeared from the crowd, his shirt unbuttoned just enough to suggest ease, his smile wide. He clapped a hand against Javier's shoulder, his grip firm. The music masked his words, but his meaning was clear. This was now Javier's world. His place, his role, his burden. Javier's tasks began simply. Carry drinks. Sweep floors. Watch doors. But he knew these tasks were only surface. Each night tested him, pulled him deeper. He learned the faces of men who never gave their names. He memorized signals, glances that spoke louder than words. He saw envelopes pass beneath tables, hands resting too long on folded papers. At times, the glamour dazzled him. The lights, the music, the endless flow of laughter. Wealth moved through the club like water, spilling across tables, filling glasses, sparkling in jewelry. Yet he knew the cost. Each coin carried a shadow. Each smile hid a secret. Still, he stayed. For Manuel. He often thought of his brother as he worked. He pictured Manuel's eyes, quiet but steady, the way they had shone in candlelight years before. He remembered their mother's rosary, her whispered prayers. He thought of Diego too, of the triangle pulling them all close. But each time he felt fear, he repeated the truth. This was for them. He could carry it. He must. The nights stretched long. The music never stopped. Even at dawn, when the city softened, the club still hummed. Javier would step outside then, the cool air hitting his face, the sky pale with the first light. Birds called faintly from rooftops, their notes sharp and clean. He would breathe deep, trying to wash away the smoke and noise, but the weight stayed. One evening, as he wiped a table near the stage, he noticed the band pause between songs. The trumpets rested. The drummer tapped lightly, tap-tap, keeping rhythm alive. The singer leaned against the microphone, his eyes sweeping the room. For a moment, silence filled the space, stretched thin. Then the music roared again, louder, faster, pulling everyone back. Javier felt the metaphor clear. The music was endless, but beneath its silence waited. And in that silence, truth lived. Luis often reminded him without words. A glance across the room, a slow sip of his drink, a nod toward a man at the bar. Javier learned quickly. He could not refuse. He could not stumble. The debt demanded obedience. And yet, within the haze of neon and smoke, Javier sometimes found strange comfort. The club became a second skin, heavy but familiar. The rhythm of the music matched the rhythm of his heart. The endless beat drowned his fear, even if only for moments. Weeks blurred into months. The debt did not vanish, but it shifted, piece by piece. Each hour Javier gave belonged not to him but to his family. Each task completed was another step toward their survival. The city outside continued, restless as ever. Protests rose in plazas. Laws changed, then changed again. Whispers of violence reached the news, names connected to power, names too dangerous to repeat. But in Club Ramírez, time bent differently. The same music, the same lights, the same hidden deals. A cycle that never broke. Javier carried trays of drinks, the glasses clinking with each step. Clink, clink, clink. He listened to laughter that never reached the eyes. He saw smiles that hid steel. He stood at doors that led nowhere safe. Each night reminded him of the line he had crossed. But each night also reminded him why. Manuel. Their mother. Even Diego. They were the reason he could stand here. The reason he could bear Luis's smile. The reason he could ignore the shadows. One night, as dawn neared, the band ended with a slow bolero. The notes lingered, soft and aching. The crowd swayed, tired but unwilling to leave. The lights dimmed, one by one, until only a faint glow remained. Javier stood near the door, the tray now empty, his body heavy with exhaustion. He looked toward the stage, the last note hanging in the air. The silence that followed felt deep, almost tender. For a moment, he allowed himself to close his eyes. The sound of the city woke around him, the call of birds, the rattle of a passing bus, the whisper of wind across empty streets. The night was over. The debt remained. But so did the bond that guided him. Javier stepped outside. The cool air wrapped around him. His breath came slow, steady. The neon sign still flickered behind him, its hum fading as distance grew. Ahead, the streets stretched wide, quiet for now. He walked toward the pale horizon, each step measured, each step calm. The night had claimed him, but the dawn still waited. And in that waiting, Cliffhanger, he found Camila on stage, staring at Javier. The night opened with color. The streets were dark, but the sign of the club burned bright, its letters washed in red and violet. Neon flickered against the walls, humming low, buzzing like an insect in the summer heat. The glow reached Javier's face as he stepped forward. His shadow stretched long across the pavement. Each step sounded clear. Tap, tap, tap. The door of Ramírez creaked as it closed behind him. Inside, sound wrapped around him at once. The heavy rhythm of drums. The bass deep, almost like a heartbeat. Boom, boom, boom. The smoke in the air clung to the ceiling. Perfume lingered, sharp and sweet. Glasses clinked. Voices rose in laughter, then dropped again, blending into the music. Javier paused. His chest lifted slowly as he took in the scene. The weight of the debt pressed on him, but here the world disguised itself as pleasure. Lights danced across the floor, red fading to purple, purple shifting to blue. The music pulled people closer, bodies swaying in rhythm, shadows blurring into one another. At the far end, the stage glowed. A spotlight cut through haze, falling on a single figure. Camila. She stood tall, her posture straight, her presence undeniable. Her dress shimmered in the light, each fold catching red and violet. Her hair was pulled back, sharp, precise. The microphone rested in one hand, but she was not singing. Not yet. She simply stood, eyes fixed, gaze locked. She was known by many names. Some called her the Rose of the Cartel. Others whispered of her as the shadow behind her husband, the one who saw more than anyone else. She carried strength that unsettled men, and beauty that demanded attention. Wherever she appeared, silence followed. Javier felt her gaze before he truly met it. The weight of her eyes pressed into him, sharp and heavy. When he finally looked up, their eyes met fully. The music did not stop, but it seemed to soften. The lights blurred. The air itself stilled. Her expression did not shift. Calm, unreadable. Yet within her stillness, something burned. Possession. Jealousy. A warning not spoken, but felt. Javier froze for a moment, his breath caught in his throat. He tried to lower his gaze, but it was too late. The connection had already formed. She had marked him, not as a worker in her husband's club, not as a man lost in the crowd, but as something else. A piece she now recognized. The music pushed on. Trumpets cut sharp. Drums thundered louder. Boom, boom, boom. Glasses clinked harder as laughter rose once more. The neon lights spun across the walls, painting Javier's face in streaks of red and purple. He took another step forward. His shoes brushed the floor with a faint scrape. The club felt larger now, as though the walls had pulled away. Yet the gaze remained, steady, unbroken. Camila shifted slightly, lifting her chin, her eyes never leaving his. The spotlight framed her face in pale light, her features clear against the haze. The silence of her stare drowned out the music. Javier's chest tightened. He thought of Manuel. He thought of Diego. He thought of Luis and the paper on the table. But most of all, he thought of how quickly danger could find him here, in this place of smoke and song. A single note from the guitar rang sharp, cutting through the noise. Twang. It echoed in his chest. He blinked, but when his eyes opened, the gaze was still there. The club kept moving around him. Waiters carried trays, the glasses clinking. Clink, clink, clink. Dancers spun, their shoes sliding. Swish, swish. Voices shouted in joy. Yet all of it blurred into background. Only her remained. Camila lowered the microphone slowly, her hand steady. Her lips pressed into the faintest smile, sharp at the edges. Not warm. Not soft. A smile that carried claim and threat. Javier's pulse quickened. He felt the neon press against his skin, red and violet mixing into strange shades. The bass rattled his chest, but his mind focused only on her eyes. He could not turn away. The moment stretched long, unbroken, like the silence before a storm. He felt as though the entire room had tilted, every light and sound bent toward this single exchange. The crowd around him blurred into shadows. The stage, the spotlight, the gaze, they remained sharp. And then, stillness. Camila lifted the microphone back to her lips. The band paused, holding breath. The club leaned forward. But before a note left her mouth, she looked once more, directly, firmly, into Javier's eyes. It was not an accident. It was not casual. It was a choice. A mark. The lights dimmed further, violet overtaking red. The music held for one beat, then two. The crowd murmured, restless. Javier's hands curled into fists, not in anger, but in fear. His thoughts scattered. The neon shimmered. The bass throbbed. The spotlight burned. And her eyes stayed. The scene ended there. A cut, sudden but soft. The neon lights hummed. Buzz. The music throbbed. Boom. The gaze lingered, heavy and unbroken, carrying into silence. The night closed, leaving only that stare. And the story rested, waiting for dawn.